Joe Burrow and the Bengals looking for redemption against Lamar Jackson's Ravens. Cincinnati played miserable football against the Cleveland Browns in the opener. And you figure, well, they'll bounce back at home against the Ravens and trying to avoid the 0-2 start. That was the buildup. That was the lead-up to this game. I don't know if you saw it or not. Possibly not. But not much of a performance by the Cincinnati Bengals offense here. Lamar Jackson accounting for 291 total yards and not one but two touchdown passes. Baltimore holding off the Bengals 27-24 the final. The Poets get the win. The Ravens improved to 2-0. They didn't look very good against the Texans in the opener. They still won that game by a wide margin, but they get the win here in a 3-point game. Better story in the losing locker room where Cincinnati does indeed fall to 0-2. Holy crap, 0-2. Now, Joe Burrow had another stink bomb performance in this game after opening up the season with new levels of suckage, one of the worst games in the last decade in the NFL, where he attempted 30-plus passes, had less than 100 yards passing, and only a couple of other players have been able to pull that off in the NFL in the last decade. So let us discuss, what is your level of concern for the Cincinnati Bengals? Only 2 weeks in the NFL season. We're going to turn to the patented Maller scale of concern, 1 to 10, with 10 being our season is already sunk. You've sunk our battleship. That would be a 10. And I'm going to raise the alarm bells on the Cincinnati Bengals. I am going to an 8.5. 8.5 is where I'm going for the Cincinnati Bengals, and here's why. Okay, I've got Yogi, Baywatch, and Leprechaun, and we'll combine all of these things together, and we are going to make a pair of sunglasses. Not the kind Deion Sanders wears in night games, just a pair of regular sunglasses you wear during the day. All right, so number one. The season has already started to come apart at the seams. Is that hyperbole? Is that shock jock radio guy speaking about the Cincinnati Bengals? I don't think it is. You were given a gift here early in the year. Cleveland, which is below you talent-wise, in game one. Oh, it rained. Oh, who gives a crap? You play in a city where it gets bad weather in Cincinnati, and you're complaining about the rain in Cleveland. That's embarrassing. And then you come home, you're playing a Ravens team that's still trying to figure things out. They didn't look particularly great against the Texans. You're at home. This should be a 2-0 start. And you go out there, and it turns out to be a total boondoggle to begin the year, 0-2. Cincinnati, with that roster loaded to bear, they've been right on the doorstep of winning a championship in one of the top teams in the AFC the last couple of years. It's Kansas City, Cincinnati, and then Buffalo in that order. And what happened? And Cincinnati goes out there, and they have sucked at a time you cannot suck, Sunday afternoon. And they've got all the tools, and yet you look around, and a FUBAR performance. Mr. Reliable has been Mr. Unreliable. Joe Burrow has been the weakest link. Who expected that? I did not have that on my bingo card, that Joe Burrow would be a problem. Now, I was optimistic. I was Benny Brightside that Joe Burrow would have a redemption situation against the Ravens going into this weekend, because I assumed the position that Joe Burrow has had an off game in the opener and he would figure things out going into week 2. This was not some kind of underlying medical condition. Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. Now you look and you're like, wait a minute. And you take a couple of steps back and you look around. So it was only week 2. They play 17 weeks. We had a lot of time left. But Joe Burrow's got an issue, right? The calf thing flared up, supposedly. He's hopping around there. He's limping. So you got Joe Burrow on a pogo stick. And then you're 0-2 in that old Yogi Berra line that it gets late early out there. And 2 losses in a row is akin in a baseball to 10 losses. Every loss in football is like 10 losses in baseball. So if a baseball team started the year 0-20, would we say things are going well or not well? That's a rhetorical question, right? So, whoever you like, if you're a Red Sox fan or a Dodger fan or Twins fan, whatever, and they start out 0-20, you're probably not expecting the playoffs at that point, right? Now, I don't want to speak for you. Maybe you're just a cockeyed optimist and you think they're going to make the playoffs. But 0-2 in the division, the Ravens are 2-0, not in the division, but 2-0, And you got the Joe Burrow calf injury flaring up, which means he will likely not be able to play. Cincinnati, in the coming game anyway, Cincinnati's offense has 2 touchdowns in 8 quarters of football. Now, again, I did not play in the NFL. I don't have a resume of coaching in the NFL, but I just do the overnight show. That doesn't seem good. That does not seem good. And they got the Rams up next. You say, well, the Rams you thought would be an easy win. Not an easy win. Right? Not an easy win anymore. The Rams, they'll make mistakes with Matthew Stafford, but they're going to scratch and claw. And all of a sudden, that's a Monday night game. That's what's next for Cincinnati. And the backup quarterback is Jake Browning. I'd rather have Tom Browning, who I don't think's with us anymore, the old Cincinnati Red pitcher from back in the day, but Jake Browning is the backup quarterback. Would you take Jake Browning and the Bengals against the Rams in the Monday night game? I would not. Now, the Bengals are favored by 6 points in that game, so the odds makers must expect Joe Burrow to play. I do not expect Joe Burrow to play in that game, but this is quickly turning into an avalanche for the Cincinnati football team. Now, page 2. Speaking of avalanches, let's go to Nashville, where Nick Folk, the Folk hero, and he kicked a 41-yard field goal in overtime in the rain, and the Tennessee Titans edged the Chargers 27-24. Derrick Henry had 80 yards on the ground and a score. Tennessee now 1-1, but the better story in the losing locker room, we have a coaching kerfluffle to talk about. The Chargers are 0-2. They blew an 11-point lead against a team that is inferior talent-wise to them. And after the game, Brandon Staley had, by his standards, a meltdown at the dais. Now, Brandon Staley, pretty boring as an interview. He's not in our top 10, not in our top 20. He just says nothing interesting. Nothing interesting ever. But Brandon Staley melted down. He was asked about the Jacksonville game, and that led to Brandon Staley exploding like a rocket as he tried, by his standards. Again, you got to judge these things by Brandon Staley's standards, but take a listen to the Charger coach. We've got the audio. Here is Brandon Staley getting a little testy with the line of questioning.
I'm not worried about the Jacksonville loss. The Jacksonville loss hasn't carried on to the season whatsoever. If you've seen our training camp or you've seen the way we played in the first 2 games, it hasn't had an impact on our team whatsoever. Our team is connected. Our team has played its heart out in 2 games, and we've lost 2 tough games. But it has nothing to do with the Jacksonville game. And if you ask anyone in our locker room, it has nothing to do with the Jacksonville game. And that's just the truth. It's a convenient storyline for you and for everybody else, but it's not the truth. We've lost 2 tough games, but the guys in that locker room, the men in that locker room, they are finishers and they have what it takes, and we're excited to prove ourselves.
Coach, it's Ben Maller, Fox Sports Radio. You've had 2 chances to prove yourself, and you've puked all over the field in those 2 games.
I'm as mad as hell!
And haven't you done the same thing you did in Jacksonville in that playoff game? I love how the coach is like, well, that's a convenient storyline for you. It's an accurate storyline, you dummy! All right, you should be fired. You shouldn't have been back this year. You suck. I don't know what happened. You were supposedly a great defensive coordinator with the Rams. You learned from Vic Fangio. Brandon Staley is a 0 as a head coach. The fact that he's still coaching the Chargers is a byproduct of the fact the ownership's too cheap to get rid of him, because then they got to pay him and they got to pay another coach. So instead, they just continue with mediocrity. It's insane. And you know, they need a lifeguard. It's like Baywatch. They got to bring a lifeguard out there to save the Chargers because they drown on a weekly basis. And the fact that he said, well, you know, it's a convenient storyline, that really rubbed me the wrong way. It is accurate. This is what they do. They blow leads. They lose close games. Bad teams lose close games. It's like the Twilight Zone. The Chargers get hyped up. They have all this talent. Justin Herbert, we paid him. He's the greatest thing in the world. Blah, 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 blah. Chargers go out, blow games. They're supposed to win. They blow games. That's what the Chargers do. Rinse, wash, repeat. That's it. And Brandon, it's like, I don't know what he did. Maybe he broke a mirror the day he signed the contract with the Chargers. He's got 7 years bad luck. Certainly seems that way. And the Chargers now, they meet their match. You talk about the jinx matchup. Chargers and Minnesota Vikings. In week number 3, the Vikings have lost 2 close games, blew a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. Now, the game in Philadelphia was really not all that close. They got a backdoor push in that particular game. But these are 2 teams that both own hexes. And so we'll see what happens in that game. By the way, if you're wondering what the gambling market says about that game, the Chargers opened a 2-point favorite. They are favored by 1 in Minnesota in that game. Now, final stop on this merry-go-round, round and round and round and round the NFL. We're going to go to Dallas, where, how about them Cowboys? Cowboys, the 5th team, we are told, in the Super Bowl era to have at least 70 points and then allow 10 or fewer in the first 2 games of the season. They have absolutely roasted the New York Giants and the New York Jets, so they own the tri-state area there, the Dallas Cowboys. And owner Jerry Jones was gushing with praise, telling reporters that the head coach, Mike McCarthy, deserves credit for that. He said, quote, "I like the way Mike," meaning McCarthy, "was very visible today, his approach to how we're going to be offensively all the way around. He had this charted out," Jerry Jones said with a cocky smile on his face. He said, "I can't say enough about Mike McCarthy here. Y'all," to prove he's really Jerry Jones, owner of the Cowboys, he said, "y'all give him his due here. He's got a lot to do with how these 2 games have come out," close quote. Now, the last part of that is obviously the money part, that you all give him his due. Like we need to throw flowers at Mike McCarthy. I think Mike would rather have us throw turkey sandwiches at him than flowers, but what do I know? Anyway, listen, here's how much credit I will give Mike McCarthy, right? We'll ask the question, how much credit do you give Mike McCarthy? The Cowboys are off to a 2-0 start this year. So after a thorough minutes-long review of both Dallas Cowboy games, I am going to give Mike McCarthy, and I'm being fair here, I'm not going to be like the radio shock jock guy, 0% of the Dallas Cowboys credit Mike McCarthy. The defense has been great, but it's also more of how pathetic the Giants were not ready to play to start that game. And this Jets game, I mean, who are we kidding here? Right? The Cowboys have the leprechaun on their side so far this year. They have been eating their Lucky Charms. They have Lady Luck is shining down on Dallas. Location. It's when you play teams. They play the Giants, who were not ready to play. I guess they had something else going on to begin the year. And then the Jets, who were sleepwalking. Now, I expected the Jets to come out and compete and all that. And I saw the Cowboys kick a lot of field goals. I don't know that we'd praise Mike McCarthy when you're kicking a lot of field goals. What was it, 5 field goals for the Dallas Cowboys in this game? I wouldn't get too worked up about that. They're living a charmed life, and if only you can keep playing opponents like that. And the Cowboys have another softie on the schedule, the Arizona Cardinals, coming up. So are we going to have to kiss Mike McCarthy's ass again next week? Probably so. Cowboys are a double-digit road favorite in that game. They're favored by 12.5 on the opening line.